Okay, so let's try that again. Building efficiency, identifying ways to improve building efficiency based on financial goals, timing, and other constraints. So my name is Yarina Mujica with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'll be moderating today's session. And we are joined today by Elizabeth Kelly from the Community Preservation Corporation and Jon Braman from Bright Power. This is the second in a three-part webinar series based on the handbook developed by CPC and partners to develop a guide for the process of understanding how to underwrite to energy efficiency in the mortgage lending process. Just to give you a little bit of background here, I work for the Energy Efficiency for All Coalition. This is a coalition-driven 12-state initiative to increase energy efficiency in affordable multifamily housing. The group is made up of the Natural Resources Defense Council, the National Housing Trust, Elevate Energy, and Energy Foundation. As part of this initiative, one of the areas that we focus on is helping to develop resources and support strategies that increase the ability for affordable multifamily properties to access financing that will allow them to invest in efficiency and other strategies that improve, that reduce the cost and improve the quality of the housing. The CDFI Clean Energy in Affordable Housing Learning Network is one part of that. And this is a group that is made up of the Community Investment Corporation, Elevate Energy, Enterprise Community Partners, LISC, National Housing Trust, NRDC, and Community Preservation Corporation, who will be presenting to us today on this webinar. As part of the CDFI Learning Network, we are developing a set of resources and gathering learnings to share with the network of lenders and help us to expand and employ that knowledge to benefit affordable housing. So we have a website planned that will be launching later this year, and that will be collecting resources such as case studies, best practices, and other guides relevant to lending to affordable housing energy efficiency improvements. We're developing a transaction database that will help to provide reference points for transactions that have underwritten to energy efficiency. And of course, there's this webinar series that we are in the midst of right now. So before I hand it over to Elizabeth and Jon, I'd like to put up a quick poll of the group. If you all could just go ahead and fill this out. Let's see if we can get this up on the screen. All right, we might have to skip the poll for today. And the
poll is up, Yarina. You just since you're presenting, you might not be able to see it, but
see it. Okay, fantastic.
For about 90%, so I'll let it go for another moment.
Perfect.
And then I can, if you can't see, I'll just tell you what the results are.
That sounds great. I cannot see it.
Okay. So I'm sharing the poll results on the screen right now. How knowledgeable are you about the topic of today's webinar? We have the largest percentage, 38%, that say, I know a little bit about this topic, and then roughly similar percentages saying that they're very new to this topic, understand the key concepts related to this topic, and some have worked on this topic. 0% responded that they have professional expertise on the topic.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Elizabeth and Jon to walk through this topic in more detail.
Great, thank you, Yarina. We're so happy to be here. My name is Elizabeth Kelly, and I manage the sustainability programs at CPC, the Community Preservation Corporation. We're joined today by Mr. Jon Braman, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Bright Power, an energy service provider here in New York City that works nationally. And we work together a lot on energy and sustainability initiatives in the New York affordable housing arena and industry. And I'll have him talk a little bit more about himself and the work that he does, but want to provide a little bit of an introduction to CPC and the work we do and the background to today's webinar. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Community Preservation Corporation, we're a nonprofit affordable housing and neighborhood revitalization lender and CDFI. We were founded in 1974 to address the renovation needs of New York's aging and deteriorating multifamily housing stock. Our work focuses on providing construction and permanent financing to owners of multifamily housing in low and moderate income neighborhoods. We try, and I think we are pretty successful at using our flexible financing to support the preservation of both existing buildings as well as new construction of affordable rental housing throughout New York State. That's just a little bit of our kind of elevator pitch. I don't have control, so as we advance through the slide deck, one of the things that is really important to CPC and kind of grounds us in our work, especially as it relates to energy efficiency, is just the opportunity that's available at the time of first mortgage financing for owners and investors to make improvements in their property that improve the economics of a building, as well as the kind of social equity and environmental returns that we commonly see with energy efficiency. We think, this is just such a critical time, and so buildings are already being kind of opened up and looked at as part of the recapitalization. And might be doing renovation work already, so it's a great opportunity to kind of bring in and integrate energy efficiency into that work scope as much as possible. And we see this not just as benefiting the building, but for the long term, but also there's benefits to the lenders, to the owners, to the residents, and to the community. We have put together a chart which really kind of tries to capture these three avenues and articulate graphically how energy efficiency can really impact all three major areas of interest in multifamily buildings, and that's financial stability, property condition, and tenant satisfaction. And if you've joined one of our other webinars, these two slides are a little bit of a refresher just to kind of level set the audience and let them know where we're coming from, and that CPC's approach is really broad in that we're looking at kind of all of these benefits as the result of integrating efficiency into first mortgage financing. And while you might see bus ads or a lot of borderline propaganda about the benefits of energy efficiency to building owners, to homeowners, to residents, we wanted to take a stab at kind of bringing those best practices together that we've learned here at CPC through our work around incorporating energy efficiency into mortgage underwriting into a handbook called Underwriting Efficiency, to share our experiences and the lessons learned and some tools and best practices with the CDFI and the affordable housing lending community. So this, our handbook has been kind of in circulation for about 6 months. It's definitely written with an eye towards mortgage lenders and those in the CDFI community. And but I think there's a lot of great takeaways for kind of anybody that's touching this industry, whether you're a policymaker or building or asset manager, building owner. And what the handbook really provides is a resource to help people through the process of incorporating energy efficiency into their lending business, as well as articulating really the business case for lenders specifically. So if you were able to join our webinar a couple weeks ago, we focused on the first chapter in the book. I say chapter, and that's kind of a rough term. I think it's like 4 pages. 4 pages in the book that are the understanding efficiency, where it really talked about the triple bottom line and the business case of doing efficiency as part of financing. Today, we're going to talk about building energy efficiency, building efficiency of today's topic, really what is energy efficiency, what are some measures that work in multifamily buildings, what kind of savings do we see, how do we do it, how do we pay for it? So that's what we'll be covering today. And then the third section is we're going to have a webinar at the end of November on the 29th, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that will go through the process that CPC as well as a couple other CDFIs have taken to integrate efficiency really into their business process, from originating and sourcing deals all the way through performance monitoring and loan servicing, and how all of this ties together. So that's my big introduction. One thing I want to mention, and I think it's available, but you can download the handbook directly from the webinar. Irina or Bettina, I'm pretty sure that's still an option today, but there should be a little button on kind of where your dashboard is for this webinar. But if you can't find it there, it's available on our website, or you can Google CPC Underwriting Efficiency Handbook, and it will probably be one of your first hits. So enough plugging. So I'm happy to have Jon Braman sitting right next to me from Bright Power, as I mentioned. Welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome, Jon.
It's great to be here.
Thank you for coming. Can you tell the lovely viewers a little bit about yourself and about Bright Power?
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. Again, Jon Braman with Bright Power. It's been really exciting to be part of the team that worked with CPC on this guide, and happy to be part of the discussion today. Bright Power is an energy service provider focused on actually both energy and water in multifamily buildings. We think of ourselves as sort of a long-term partner for multifamily real estate companies. You can see on the screen we've done over 1,500 energy audits. We have a platform called Energy Scorecards, where we track energy and water use of multifamily properties around the country, have over 30,000 multifamily buildings in that database. We also provide installation services, where we actually install energy and water efficiency as well as renewable energy systems, have offices in New York and California. But one of the reasons it's really exciting to be part of this is, even though our primary work is working for building owners and property managers, we see this as an opportunity to share some of our technical experience in a way that can help the lending community really get to a place where it is not only allowing, but really supporting and enabling and accelerating the adoption of energy and water efficiency in multifamily portfolios, and having it be an easy, normal thing for multifamily building owners to get financing to support energy and water efficiency. It's just a fabulous direction for the market to go that will help us and also all of our clients who are the owners of multifamily buildings. So it's great to be part of it.
Have you seen kind of big picture about the impact that lenders can have, especially mortgage lenders can have, and how many buildings have mortgages and how many will need to refinance in the next 10 and 15 years? We're using the influence that a mortgage lender has, and kind of just the access to so many deals, finding ways to communicate as a lender, both kind of up and down the chain, like to your C-suite, to your investors that this is a good idea, as well as kind of to your borrowers and to your customers and to the engineers and practitioners that work with you and help support you. It seems like a very clear path to get to scale around energy efficiency, especially in the affordable housing, multifamily, LMI space.
Absolutely, and I think that was that sort of transformative potential of working with mortgage lenders to, not provide some special niche way to finance energy upgrades, but actually inform or tweak or strengthen the normal way that pretty much every multifamily building has a mortgage.
Right.
So if you can change the way that they get mortgages to have that be a time when, as a standard practice, multifamily properties incorporate energy and water efficiency, it really does feel like that could get us to scale.
Absolutely. That's the dream. That's what we're working to achieve here. Okay, so the next slide is we're going to dive into our building efficiency segment. And this webinar series was really designed to be kind of a crash course or an introduction to what's available in the handbook, and hear from myself and Jon. We've both worked a lot on putting this information together, how we kind of envision people to use it, and how the resources that are in the handbook can be made applicable to you all listening and to the webinar today and to the future. I think I've been in my role for about 5 years, working at CPC and talking to mortgage officers and our originations team about energy efficiency. And the most common questions are just, well, what is energy efficiency? Like, what are the measures, and how can I? And I think it's one of those areas that intimidates a lot of people, even myself sometimes. Like, I'm not a mechanical engineer. Like, can I really talk about heating systems? Yes, I can. I've learned because someone needs to. But this section is really, the goal was to help educate the lending and origination and underwriting and the whole lending stratosphere about what are some measures around that. What is energy efficiency? What are those measures? How much could they cost? What might work for one building and not for another one? And then us keeping to push our agendas. How do we actually get these done and included as part of financing? So that's really what we're going to be talking about today. And again, it's kind of a primer to the actual handbook, because there's a lot more information in there, as well as some resources on both of our websites. So we have a slide here that kind of talks about the 3 different levels of investment that we're going to be focusing on today. We sometimes call this our shades of green or our green spectrum, but at the light end of that is what we call our simple upgrades, which is really just, well, it's simple, it's pretty straightforward. It's kind of what we think should be done on every single property. The next level is moderate renovation, and as the name suggests, really pairs well with a mod rehab scope. The mod, some kitchens and baths, maybe a little joist replacement, some common area upgrades. You're doing work in buildings and inside the buildings, possibly in unit, but the key word I think for this is really upgrading. You're upgrading the systems that you have and making them run as best as they can. And then the third, and kind of the dark green end of the spectrum, is substantial improvements, which is focusing on kind of replacing existing with the best and the brightest, and really high performance equipment, and finding ways to move the building off of fossil fuel and cut down on total consumption in a very holistic approach. So we're going to go through each of those steps right now, starting with the simple upgrade, and then we'll take a deeper dive into one of the scenarios. We wanted to give everybody kind of the general knowledge, umbrella knowledge about what fits along this green spectrum. Okay, so simple upgrade. These measures can be implemented by any building owner to lower operating costs and improve asset value, as well as boost performance. Upgrades can actually be installed by a local contractor and can be easily maintained by a building's maintenance staff. Completing a couple of these measures, like one or two at a time, will produce modest savings, and the savings and the data is definitely there. But by thinking about this scope holistically and implementing a set of improvements to several systems in the building could really lead to some serious savings, something around the range of 10 to 15%. This kind of level of investment is probably best for well-maintained properties that are seeking straight refinance or modest updates to apartment units. And most of the recommendations would touch kind of common areas as well as some apartment work, but without a lot of substantial changes to the building systems or disruption. We're not talking about moving people or even for a day. Quick repairs, you can go in and go out, and most of them are really low cost and can even be, bought off the shelf in some scenarios and installed by your maintenance professional on site, your super, or whoever kind of comes in and does work for you to maintain the properties, or a contractor that you're familiar with.
I think this one thing that's really exciting about this category to me is that it is the no-brainer stuff, right? Low flow shower heads and kitchen and bathroom faucets, LED lighting, temperature controls, thermostats, pipe insulation, weather stripping. These are basic things. I'm sure that the more experienced folks on the call are thinking, yeah, I've been there, done that. We know all about that. But
stay with it. We'll get to you.
Right. We're excited about the deeper shades of green, but also I think in our experience we've seen that just because these are no-brainer measures really doesn't mean that most multifamily buildings still don't have them. And so having an awareness in the lending community about these types of measures, so that if you're doing a straight refinance, relatively quicker, easier deal, you can still act as that kind of net to make sure that properties aren't slipping through the cracks, and continuing to use lights that are using much more energy than the LEDs that are now standard on the market will use, or water fixtures that are wasting water down the drain unnecessarily. So these things are simple, but we also don't want to take for granted they're not yet at scale or at the scale that they could be. So there's really an opportunity here. Again, because they're simple, you don't need tons of engineering or even necessarily an energy audit to know that it's a good idea to put LED lights in the common areas or to put low flow fixtures on the shower heads and faucets. So I'd encourage the folks that are more experienced on the call to not move too quickly past these, because there are some properties in your portfolio, or if you're a lender, some of your borrowers certainly don't have all these measures in their properties right now, and there's a real opportunity to get some sure, quick and easy savings that can really materialize.
It's quick, it's easy. These measures that we go into more detail in the handbook can apply to a large variety of building types. And these are things that are easy to install. It's not going to be a big headache or a lot of brain damage, and they're low cost to install. And the payback is really proven. These aren't things you need to really hem and haw over, do a complicated cost-benefit analysis for. These are pretty straightforward things. And I think where we would like to see this used, and what we encourage at CBC, is that this is the baseline. This is where we want to see all properties that we're financing at least meeting this threshold. Because we know not every building comes to us and is ready to do a complete head-to-toe gut remodel and get ready for passive house. It's not everyone's goal, but that we see a lot of quick refinances. Someone comes to us, they have a 90-day close, and this is the list that we hand to people and say, have you thought about these? Can you make these changes? Which ones of these have you already done? Do you need any information about X, Y, and Z? And it's also a great way to kind of enter into the incentive area, because there is a lot of incentives, at least in our part of the country, for these types of measures.
Yep, and incentives for sure. Rebates from utilities often cover these types of measures. And one thing I'll just add as additional encouragement for the lenders, that even though these are cost effective, especially for affordable housing, They may not be big budget items, but properties that are really cash strapped still may not be able to afford them on their own. Yeah. And so the lender really can play a key role. It'll hardly make a dent in your scope for the refinance, but it might have been out of reach otherwise for the property.
And I think that we focus a lot on refinance and how energy efficiency connects to mortgage financing, because that's what we do here at CPC. But especially this page and the simple upgrades, these are things that could also be incorporated in kind of a tenant turnover checklist. It could be paid for as just as part of annual or daily maintenance and repairs. Do you see examples of that in the buildings that you work with, Jon?
Absolutely, yeah. And again, it often really depends on the cash flow situation of the property.
Yeah.
Some can just work these in either gradually or all at once if there are really good incentives, or they just have the money, and others really are stuck knowing that it's a good idea and not having a way to do it.
Yeah, okay. So we'll move on to moderate renovation. So I think you're on the right page with us too, moderate renovation. It's slide 13. So when a building owner is considering a more moderate renovation or building as a really high energy or water user, and we'll get into how to identify that later, there's an excellent opportunity to boost efficiency through targeted retrofit of existing systems or replacement of key building components. And so that's what this kind of level of investment is really focusing on. Incorporating efficiency measures into a planned renovation. Some buildings might pursue just a straightforward energy retrofit and look for financing for that, but in a lot of cases and a lot of work we do, there's other non-energy related renovation work that needs to be happening for a building. So this is a list and kind of a sample scope that we have that really emphasizes measures that can be done and pair well with kind of a moderate renovation in the traditional sense. This is really, just to reiterate, best for properties that are ready to complete some modest improvements, probably as part of mortgage financing. This might not be, we might not need a full-on construction loan to do this kind of work. What we see is and I don't want to get too much into the weeds on this because they really covered it more on the first webinar and then again on the third webinar. But if you come in and you're getting a holistic scope that's prepared for you by perhaps an energy engineer and project savings over your historicals because you're doing this scope of work, underwriting to the projected savings instead of the historicals really can yield the type of cash flow or the additional loan proceeds, I should say, that can support this amount of work. I see a lot of deals that when we underwrite to the savings, we're bringing in or leveraging another $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 per unit, and it really can cover the cost of a comprehensive retrofit, which is kind of the level of investment we're talking about right now. Jon, do you want to talk a little bit about what kind of scope items you might see here and how best to approach this type of level of energy investment?
Yeah, so we're sort of at the next level now of still tried and true energy and water efficiency measures that have been well proven at properties all over the country for many years. We know that this stuff works, but it tends to be a bit of a larger investment, and also can take a little bit more thought and engineering to make sure that you're doing the right thing for that particular property. Whereas on the lighting side, pretty much any property that doesn't have LEDs can save from going to LEDs. When you're talking about replacing a domestic hot water heater or roof insulation or high efficiency pumps and motors, there's a little more thought that's needed to make sure you're doing an upgrade that is right for that building and understand what the potential savings are. Obviously, if you put in a brand new domestic hot water heater that is the same efficiency as what you had before, it may not make any difference, right? So this is where getting an energy audit or a green physical needs assessment or a related study, there are many different sort of variations on that theme, but a study by a qualified energy consultant or engineer to help figure out that scope, figure out what the projected savings are so that the underwriter can have a sense of how your ongoing expenses will be impacted becomes important. And the types of measures that you can see on the screen in the actual guidebook, you can get a longer list, include things like replacing hot water heaters, insulation. We get into things in a cold climate. If you have central heat, we might get up to replacing the boiler, but even if you don't get that far, we're talking about putting in better heating controls, putting in TRVs, thermostatic radiator valves, or other measures to make the distribution of heat throughout a building be more efficient, so you don't have imbalances where one part of the building is cold, so you end up overheating everyone else to make sure that one corner gets the bare minimum. So measures like that, big potential savings, but take a bit more study to identify the right measure and implement it successfully. But there's a lot of exciting things in this category, and if you look in the guidebook, you'll see there's no exact science to what's simple and what's moderate. There's sort of a spectrum, and we try to bucket things to help folks wrap their heads around them. I think a lot of energy engineers, and speaking for some of my colleagues at Bright Power, we can get lost in the weeds of exactly what the right measure is and all the different considerations, and you'll see some of those common considerations in the handbook as well. But the important part here is we want to spread the word. We want to open everyone's minds to really the great variety of things you can do when you're undertaking a moderate renovation to improve energy and water.
And I think the role that an energy-focused engineer can also play is how to think about this holistically. Like, we have a physical needs assessment or capital needs, the capital condition report, or whatever you call it in your neck of the woods. But taking those kind of critical repairs and the capital investments that you have planned for the next 5 or 10 years, and identifying the energy efficiency and the expense reduction opportunities that would tie to that, and say, okay, you're going to convert from oil to gas. That's great, but what are the other pieces of that can really help make your building sing and become much more efficient and much more efficiently use the resources that it needs to make it comfortable and operate for its tenants. And the other great benefit and why we like working with energy engineers at CPC is because of the kind of consistent reporting and the energy models that they provide, which can be a little overwhelming or intimidating maybe to the first time you look at it, but it provides a wealth of information about how this building is going to be operating in the future. And that's one of the key pieces that we use to help justify, and we'll explore and then justify our underwriting savings and finding ways to leverage additional capital to make sure that these projects actually can be completed as part of refinancing.
I think it's a key point that when we get to the moderate renovation and then even more on the substantial rehab, that there's a lot of parts of the scope that are not driven by energy and water savings. Mm-hmm. So you might be replacing the windows or replacing doors just because they're old and they don't operate that well, or it's part of just taking care of some deferred maintenance or capital items that are at the end of their life, and identifying that, hey, if we're already doing this, the incremental cost to now put in Energy Star windows, mm-hmm. or to now make sure that the new DHW heater that you had to replace anyway is high efficiency, that incremental cost is much smaller. And so catching those moments, especially for things like windows or boilers that last 20, 30 years, that's a really key opportunity that we don't want to miss, where it's more cost effective to go for high efficiency.
Great. So now we're going to advance to substantial improvements. And so this list of measures is what we had in mind here is for the gut renovation, adaptive reuse, as well as some common practices that I think can easily be applied to new construction and should be. We didn't really focus so much on new construction. We were mostly focused throughout the creation of this resource on existing buildings, but I think new construction, gut renovation, adaptive rehab, all can kind of glean certain information from this substantial improvement section. So this is whichever one of those three things you're doing, it's really an opportune time to comprehensively improve a building's envelope, redesign central HVAC systems, that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, and integrate on-site energy generation like solar, photovoltaics, in addition to addressing the simple and moderate efficiency measures that we already talked about. I think that's something we haven't totally pointed out, but maybe people have pieced together, is that you don't just do the moderate. You need it's simple plus moderate, now plus substantial. And some of the things will kind of cross themselves off the list. It would be duplicative, but it's definitely the whole picture. And as you get to the deeper green end of the spectrum, it's incorporating all of these measures all together. So large-scale efficiency measures that we're going to be talking about here will increase the property value and produce long-term cost savings and improve the quality of life. I think it's important to keep that bigger picture in mind, especially as lenders. You know, the owner might be selling, might have certain goals about long-term holdings and whatnot, but you're making a 15, a 10, a 15, a 30-year mortgage. You might not have a chance. The lender might not have an opportunity to really address issues for many, many years, but you'll still be holding on to this asset. And so making sure it's the best performing and top of the line and meeting any kind of, achieving the stars, the gold stars that it can easily achieve now, and really set in some great financial stability, the tenant comfort, the stewardship, property condition, and quality metrics that will last for many, 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 many years.
Yeah, I mean, this is the moment where those bigger, sometimes more innovative but really impactful strategies come within reach. Because to get to really deep energy savings at the level of, say, a passive house construction requires a much tighter and much better insulated building envelope. And on the simple side, we may have said, hey, you can do some weather stripping and seal up cracks around doors or windows, reinforced caulking that may have come loose. That's all great, important, provides quick but modest benefits. But if we're opening up the walls in an adaptive reuse, there's an opportunity to actually really insulate those walls and make them much, much tighter in a way that just isn't possible unless you're really doing that kind of substantial rehab. And so you can see that the range of cost and potential savings gets a lot wider here, because sky's really the limit, and we are seeing new construction and even some renovations that are achieving actual energy performance that is 50, 75% less than it was before than typical buildings, which is very very inspiring. And so these are the really exciting moments. Of course, with those more in-depth and high-impact strategies comes a need for more engineering and thought. And so, what you see on a project like this is certainly an energy audit or something like that could be important, but it's likely that having an engineer work or an energy consultant work as part of your design team with the architect, the engineer that's on the team from hopefully as early as possible in that design process to really figure out what the opportunities are and not get started down a road that then precludes some other energy efficiency strategies. Things like solar and combined heat and power they've been around for decades, and they're proven technologies, but also things that require a bit more thought. For CHP in particular, getting the sizing right is really important, so that we have some examples where people put in a unit that is producing more power or heat than the building can really use, and so it doesn't get the cost or environmental benefits that you'd expect. Same thing with energy management systems and really whole building control systems, often that it allows some better sensing of temperatures and conditions around the property, sometimes allow remote control and visibility into what's going on. Great potential there. Also takes some more care and thought to make sure that what you're putting in will really have the results that you want. One other last thing I'll throw in that's very exciting about this type of improvement is the potential for resiliency benefits. Coming after Hurricane Sandy in New York, and of course all the hurricanes this past summer really brought to the forefront the need for properties to be prepared for extended blackouts, floods, things like that. So when you're doing this kind of substantial renovation, you can do things like move boilers out of the basement to get them away from potential floods. Or if you're thinking about solar and CHP, maybe add batteries there, or make sure that even without the batteries, that it's ready to operate in a great blackout, so that you could have power, at least for critical loads, for an extended period of time if you need it for your residents. So a lot of exciting potential here at the substantial improvement level.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to do a little bit more of provide a little bit more information on the moderate renovation level, but before we jump into that, I just want to say that if anybody has any questions, to make sure to be typing them into the dialog box, and we will try to definitely take some questions. And as those questions are coming in, we will just continue and briefly talk about some of the other features of the scope and measure list that we have as it pertains to the moderate renovation. And if we can just advance to slide 15 if we're not there already.
Sure. And Elizabeth, if I can jump in with a couple of questions that have come in. Okay. Would that be helpful? Okay. So one of them is there was a mention of, I think Jon mentioned the green physical needs assessment. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means? And let me read the other one just so you can take them both at the same time if you like, which is the question is, does cost per unit decrease when you upgrade a lot of units? Is there an economy of scale in the upgrades, and is that being factored into the numbers that you're displaying here? Those are the two questions that we have so far.
Sure. So, the green physical needs assessment is sort of one name, and there are probably different names given for this type of study. But the idea is that at the same time as you're looking at physical needs, capital needs across the property, that you're also looking at energy and water opportunities. And to do those things at the same time really has a lot of potential value, because you may have identified you need to replace toilets, but you want to then put in low-flow toilets so that you're getting energy savings as well as just upgrading the quality of the property. There's in New York we now have the integrated physical needs assessment. Some places you might just call it an energy audit. I know in Fannie Mae's program they call it the high performance building module. So there's a lot of different names for studies of this type, but it's a study of the property to identify energy and water opportunities alongside capital needs.
Great. And then do you want to just quickly touch on kind of the costs of doing these measures comprehensively?
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, thank you. So I think certainly for most measures there are economies of scale, and for the guide we tried to give pretty big ranges in most cases, and you can see that we use in the moderate renovation table these sort of Yelp type symbols with the dollars, $1, $2, or $3, or $4. So costs vary a lot from place to place based on the size of the property. Some things like refrigerators or toilets really scale pretty well with the number of units and the size of the property, but some other things like central boiler really don't. So as you get bigger, as the property grows, the cost of the boiler doesn't grow right along with it. And so it's certainly true that there are economies of scale for bigger properties for some items. And use the cost guidance here less as an exact measurement. You need someone to actually cost out any job that's going to be done at a particular property, but more as guidance to know, is it the right time for this property to be thinking about this measure? If you know that there's going to be a substantial renovation on the table and there's going to be a lot of capital spending, then that's the time when you can think about the items with 3 or 4 dollar signs there.
Okay, so we just have a couple minutes, so I want to advance just to the last slide here, Irina, if you could help us out. We'll thank everybody for joining us today. If you have more questions, you can definitely reach out to any of us. Our emails are up on the screen, or will be up on the screen shortly. We're happy to answer, but my recommendation is to go online to cpcommunityp.com, find our handbook under our sustainability section. There's so much more information in here that we could cover, literally, because we had several more slides that we couldn't get to because there's so much information. Just help us, help this industry move towards this kind of clean energy future by taking the things from the page and finding ways to use them into your business. And I think that's really the goal of this, and how we designed it was that you could print off the moderate renovation 2-pager and share it with people at, during application or when you're meeting with a client, or as a way to just start conversations about opportunities that might have been previously missed as part of refinancing. Irina, I'm going to pass it over to you. I know we have an exit poll, and you can maybe give a plug for our upcoming webinar at the end of the month.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Jon, and thank you everyone who joined this call, and thank you in particular for bearing with us through our technical difficulties. We promise to have those fixed for our next session, which is on November 29th at 3 p.m. same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, same time, and that one will focus on integrating energy efficiency, so it goes to sort of the next level on the underwriting efficiency process. So right now we'd like to put up a sort of exit poll onto the screen and ask folks to fill that out, and then we'll put the results up on the screen for you all to see. And Bettina, if you could go ahead and just read those off when you see them, that would be great.
Sure thing. All right, so I just closed the poll, and I'm going to share the answers. Well, we have moved everyone out of the one I'm very new to this topic category. We have 0% there, 0% in the having professional expertise on this topic, but we actually have a pretty even split between knowing a little bit about this topic, understanding the key concepts, and having worked on this topic.
Great, thank you, Bettina. So,
go ahead, Irina.
Nope, I was going to just wrap us up. Great to see that folks feel like this hopefully moved you along that curve. And as Elizabeth has said, please do feel free to reach out to us if you do have any questions. I know we may not have been able to get to all of the questions on the chat screen, so definitely let us know if you have others, and hopefully you will dive into this wonderful resource. Thanks all.